So I grew up basically in Tallahassee, Florida. I got married to a woman I first met when we sat next to each other in elementary school. It was a good relationship, but I also suppressed being a gay man. Have three children. Two are disabled with multiple disabilities, both mental and physical. It's hard enough to deal with that without having to think where, think about where's the money going to come from. And not just for that, it's like I can't live forever.
Every little kid is taught that they shouldn't talk to strangers. I mean, do you talk to strangers? How do you know if a stranger is worth speaking to? Hey kid, don't talk to strangers. Where's my daughter at? I'm gonna go get my daughter in here in a minute and tell her she's 3 weeks old, but she needs to know this.
Eventually, like the year I moved to New York City was the year I turned 50. At that time, I decided, if I'm going to have another life, then when would that be? I could either hunker down and, live out the life that I was dealt, or I could decide to have a different kind of life. And then there was a question of, well, how do I do that without hurting the people around me and destroying, that transition of my children getting into a group home and a family. And so it was, I don't know how we managed, all of us, to be able to do it, but that was freedom for me. I don't crave talking about that period, but I don't mind it because I think too often in society we don't share these journeys. There were some other experiences during that time. We were expecting a fourth child and decided to have an abortion in Florida, people, well, I guess everywhere, but it's particularly bad in the South where they'll come and they'll yell at you.
At the clinic?
And it's quite distressing. It's interesting for me now to be driving down Fairview Avenue, and sometimes people will be there and they'll have signs about it, and it's such a private matter, and then certainly those people who are so pro-life, they're not going to help me, if the child is born. And we had spoken to a priest about it, and he was quite helpful in describing our situation, like being in a lifeboat from the Titanic, that if you take on another person, perhaps everyone, could go down.
I long to see the day that Roe versus Wade is consigned to the ash heap of history where it belongs, and we again embrace a culture of life in America. And I promise you, different from the agenda of our opposition, of abortion on demand, including partial birth abortion and public funding of abortion, Donald Trump and I will work to advance the sanctity of life in the rule of law. We will sign a bill banning late-term abortions, and we will uphold the historic Hyde Amendment to prevent the use of taxpayer dollars to fund that which millions of Americans find to be morally objectionable.
It's very timely to think about it because if the Supreme Court, tilts further right, then, those things will be not possible. People will be forced to have children.
I don't see you all out there adopting them.
He has adopted. Gloria over here has an adopted grandchild from this facility.
Where are you? I don't see all these people at the orphanage this morning. There's orphanages all over this town. Why aren't you guys all out there picking out babies to take home? Why aren't you guys all out there this morning picking out babies to take home?
Abortion's a very easy topic to manipulate people through. You can show a picture of a fetus and get all upset, and you can tell stories about, this baby being ripped out of the womb and strangled, and, all sorts of selling for baby parts or whatever, and it's very easy to get people stirred up and excited about it. And as a result of their excitement, they will give a lot of money to the preacher who's telling these upsetting stories. And then the candidate who gets equally, on board with that will get, votes, and it has to do with manipulating people through emotion, I think. People don't want assault weapons to be available, to the public. It's like people don't want it, but the politicians were purchased, basically for allowing that to continue. And then people really would like universal health care overall, and they really, don't. They don't want to prevent people from getting abortions overall. I think our news channels are for sale, and our politicians are for sale, and we're manipulated by the television programs and sound bites of different things. And I think as a society, we've become numb, to things that we should really be listening to.
Holy. Oh my God! We have a lot of mental health problems in our country, as do other countries. But this isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it. But fortunately, somebody else had a gun that was shooting in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it would have been as bad as it was. It would have been much worse.
They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS. No, they say that no laws could have been able to prevent the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred. We call BS.
When we have people who are able to just say, well, we're calling BS, not just about that, but what about these other things too?
That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS.
As a civilization, we're evolving very quickly through social media, and the exchange of ideas is much quicker than was true a number of years ago. News travels faster. I think that's good and bad. It can keep people in a certain bubble where their even misconceptions are validated.
We're going to build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with the manipulation of the population. Right now, everyone's terrified. Not everyone, but, the society's in uproar about people coming from Mexico, and they're going to kill you, and we need to build this wall. And then you look at, that's not who's killing us.
You will not replace us! 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 You will not replace us!
Well, Like the people with the tiki torches, I think they just, they've allowed their dark impulse to terrorize someone else. You know, they enjoy terrorizing somebody else. So they've manufactured this dialogue or this alternate reality where, you know, so-called white people are being threatened, and you know there's a conspiracy, you know, against them, and it's manufactured by scientists who are making up things and political correctness or whatever.
But many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Wannabe fascists will find somebody to demonize, like Hitler did with the Jews.
Why don't you cover up every aspect of this culture, which is ultimately derived from white people on this continent? You know it as well as I do. I think that's what's going on right now. I think immigration is very important for the United States to keep that healthy and going, and the white people who feel disenfranchised are frightened of that because and I say they, even though I'm a white person, but you know the people who are fearful of change think that will take things away from them. No problem. Let me send this text, and it'll just take a second. Being an American was thought to be like maybe a moral compass in the world, and like innovation and building things. I think that still exists within people, but as a country, we've lost that way. So I don't know what that means right now.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving, Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Well, I think a fact is something that can be proven through like a scientific process. I know that it's in dispute now as a way of saying that a fact can be whatever you want it to be.
Excuse me, unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't.
I don't think he really has any, I don't think he really cares about policies, or, you know, if he cares about the effect of standing for a policy, you know, if that might, you know, stir people up, you know, or distract people.
And so always, but especially today, let us hold our loved ones close. Let us pray for healing and for peace. And let us come together as one nation to wipe away the tears and strive for a much better tomorrow.
You know, we've also been trained through reality television to enjoy this, you know, the drama that Trump is very good at stirring up. You know, the excitement of the cliffhanger and the, you know, the constant need for stimulation, you know, through a tweet or, you know, some sort of spectacle. I mean, I definitely think sometimes fantasy is helpful. You know, it's also
dangerous, if you're not grounded in something else as well. I mean, art is fantasy, and it's encourages you to think in different ways. I think in general, are we being sold things that aren't important? Of course, and it's a form of hypnotism in some ways. There's some forms of slavery that we're participating in. Student debt is one, and consumerism can be, and then of course involuntary slavery of the prison system. The United States is still like a powerful force in the world. I think our election system, I'm happy to see that gerrymandering is being addressed, because currently, like, the candidates don't reflect what the people overall would like. So I think that's a helpful sign, to have things change. If it doesn't happen in these quiet ways, then I think that we could face a dystopian future where the civilization, I don't think, as the way, like our direction of growth and the speeding train and the use of the resources, I don't think that could be, and global warming and these other things, I don't think that our civilization overall on the planet can maintain how we are. I mean, the reality is frightening, so of course you don't want to think that in the future, New York City might be underwater and all of Florida. You don't want to think that if you're in Florida.
All right. So how did you get into what you're doing now?
Well, I came to New York City in 2005. I had been working in banking and finance in Florida. And when I first came here, I was trading stocks for myself and also Forex exchange. It quickly became apparent that I needed to learn to do something else as well for like the long term. Before I left Florida, I had set up a art studio down there, and I started doing little art pieces. They were studies. I didn't even use my real name. I used Paleolithic. And so they started out like really small, and then they got bigger. And then I moved to New York and, found ways to continue that in some manner. All my art pieces are kind of relate to storytelling. One of my favorite ones is called Virtual Campfire Stories. And it's kind of like a graphic image of a campfire. But the idea is that when you first meet somebody, it's like you're telling stories around the campfire. I've seen you before, but I didn't know anything really about you. I knew you have that little art cave place here, which is really cool. But so I was curious, but, I had no idea like where you came from or anything. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. And for me, it was helpful for me during my transition period to be able to process my thoughts and feelings about where I came from and where I was going. So it was a mechanism, really. I mean, I think art in general is helpful in society to have people like question the status quo, or maybe learn something, maybe just give pleasure. It can be, of course, a lot of different things. I
think I'm empathetic. You know, that can be the best thing and the worst thing, because it's, you know, it can be hard. But yeah, I guess so.
Why is love important?
I think it's helpful to be nourished, of course, you know, and I think it's I like that people are re-examining what love is, you know, right now, especially because there are a lot of like soulmate theories, so to speak, where, you know, one person will find only one person and they'll be with that person only, and that excludes the rest of the world. But I think that and I think love, people are afraid to express love, you know, that's maybe like a non-sexual love, you know, and being able to speak about that, and that would be important and shouldn't like threaten whatever that other person has involved with them. I had this thing early on when I first moved to New York City, was that okay, this is a rather dramatic change in a person's life, you know, at the age that I made all these changes, and that, you know, I'm not a fully formed new person, but, you know, it was important to me to kind of have blinders on, you know, that I had confidence that I don't know how this is going to work out, or I don't have like the formula of where I will be like in 10 years, which is here. I know that it's important to find ways to be more open with other people, not just about the good things in your life, but like any difficulties. You know, I think people live in a fair amount of isolation, and it's unfortunate. I mean, we have a lot of superficial exchanges, you know, with quite many people typically, but I think truth would be to find people you can share intimacy with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.